The studio smelled of old paper and developing chemicals. Fluorescent lights hummed overhead, casting even, sterile light across white walls. Claire Hayes sat at the light table, spine straight, hands encased in white cotton gloves. Before her lay a strip of negatives, the last work Marcus Hayes had sent from assignment. The last, before they found him dead in this very studio. She lifted the tweezers, adjusted the edge of the negative, aligning it with millimeter precision. Inhale. Exhale. 60 beats per minute. Control through counting. This ritual, the only thing holding chaos at bay. On the wall, a massive monitor silently broadcast the courtroom. Claire didn't look directly at it, but peripheral vision caught every movement. The camera panned across the room, lingered on the defendant's bench. Amir Hassan sat motionless, hands folded in his lap, dark eyes cast downward. Those same eyes, the ones that stared out at the world from the iconic photograph hanging on the opposite studio wall. Claire froze, tweezers suspended in air. She turned her head, studying his face on the screen. Not with hatred, with something colder. The curiosity of an entomologist examining a rare specimen under glass. The man who destroyed her world turned out to be a lean figure in a dark suit. Nothing remarkable. Nothing except those eyes. She returned to work, adjusted the next negative, checked the marking. Everything had to be in its place. Order, all she had left. The sharp ring of the landline shattered the silence. Claire didn't flinch. She slowly lowered the tweezers, removed her gloves, folded them beside the light table, walked to the old phone on the desk, checked the caller ID. Unknown. Picked up. Marcus Hayes Studio. Miss Hayes? The voice was male, smooth, tinged with false sympathy. This is Brad Coleman from the New York Observer. I'd like to get your comment on the new defense strategy Mr. Hassan has adopted. Claire leaned against the edge of the desk. Her face remained unchanged. Which aspect interests you, Mr. Coleman? Well, his attorneys are claiming that your father manipulated. That is, that the photograph wasn't entirely... The photograph, Claire interrupted, her voice dropping a tone. Won the Pulitzer Prize not because it was manipulation, but because it captured the truth of human suffering. Marcus Hayes's work changed how the world perceives humanitarian crises. It saved lives. That's an invaluable contribution to journalism and art. Each word was a brick. The wall between her and chaos grew. But Mr. Hassan himself claims, the tragedy of misunderstanding, Claire continued, is that people confuse subjectivity with manipulation. Every photographer chooses angle, light, moment. That doesn't make the image a lie. It makes it art. So you're denying... I'm denying attempts to rewrite history to defend a killer. Thank you for calling, Mr. Coleman. She hung up. Her hand didn't tremble. Claire returned to the light table, put on the gloves, picked up the tweezers, but the negatives no longer came into focus. Letters and numbers on the markings blurred. She clenched her fingers. 61 beats per minute. 62. The doorbell's buzz pierced the silence an hour later. Claire approached the video panel by the door. A courier in uniform holding a tablet and a thick cardboard envelope. She pressed the intercom button. Yes? Delivery for Miss Claire Hayes. Signature required. She descended the narrow stairs, opened the heavy front door just enough to accept the envelope, signed. Closed the door with both locks, climbed back to the studio. The envelope was heavy, thick, no return address. Claire laid it on the table, retrieved a box cutter from the drawer, sliced the top edge with one precise motion. Inside, black velvet. On it lay two things. A key, old, brass, with teeth they don't make anymore, a safe deposit box key, and a sheet of paper, folded in half. Claire unfolded it. One line, printed on a laser printer. "If you want to see your father's real face, not the one hanging in a frame." Claire read the phrase again and again. Pulse remained steady, breathing controlled. But something inside, something deep beneath layers of professionalism and self-control, began to crack. Face in a frame. That's what her father called his best work. She looked at the iconic photograph of Amir on the wall. The boy stared straight into the camera, eyes bottomless. Face in a frame. Claire clenched the key in her palm, teeth bit into skin. Pain was sharp, real, an anchor. Burn it. The first thought was clear. Destroy this seed of doubt before it sprouted. She walked to the office shredder in the corner of the studio, placed her hand on the lid. Her gaze fell on the photograph again. For the first time in many years, she didn't see a symbol, not an icon of suffering. Just a boy. A child who looked at her with a question in his eyes. If she destroyed the key, she chose blindness, became complicit in a lie she didn't even know. That fear proved stronger. Claire pulled her coat from the hanger, tucked the key and note into her bag, turned off the studio lights, locked the door with both locks, descended to the street. Greenwich Village greeted her with a cool January afternoon. Familiar tree-lined streets, small cafes, bookstores, her neighborhood, her world. She descended into the subway at West 4th Street Station. The train arrived in 2 minutes. Claire sat by the window, bag on her lap. The ride to the financial district took 20 minutes. 20 minutes during which the world outside the window transformed. Low brick buildings gave way to glass canyons, bohemian warmth to the cold gleam of capital. She exited at Wall Street Station, rose to the surface. The bank building was wedged between two gleaming skyscrapers, old, nearly forgotten, facade of darkened limestone. The revolving door creaked, admitting Claire into a dusty lobby. Inside smelled of wax and old paper. Marble floor worn by millions of footsteps. Behind the high counter sat an elderly clerk in a vest. He looked up as Claire approached. "Good afternoon. How can I help you?" Claire placed the key and her passport on the counter. "I need access to a safe deposit box." The clerk took the key, examined the number on the tag, looked at the passport, frowned. "You're not the owner of this box." "The owner was my father, Marcus Hayes. He died 3 months ago. I'm his sole heir." The clerk typed something on the computer. His face remained impassive. "I'll need additional documents, death certificate, will." Claire pulled a folder from her bag. She was prepared, always prepared for everything. The clerk studied the documents for a long 5 minutes. Claire stood motionless, hands folded before her. 60 beats per minute. Finally, he nodded. "Everything's in order. Follow me." He led her through a heavy door into a corridor. They descended a narrow staircase to the basement. The air here was cold, stale, smelled of metal and time. Beyond the massive round vault door opened a room with hundreds of identical boxes. The clerk approached the wall, found the right number, inserted his key. Claire inserted hers. They turned both keys simultaneously. Click. The clerk pulled out the metal box, set it on the table in the middle of the room. "Let me know when you're finished." He left. The door closed behind him with a quiet clang. Claire was alone. She stood staring at the closed box, heart beating steadily, breathing controlled. But her hands, when she placed them on the cold metal, trembled. She opened the lid. Inside, On faded blue velvet lay a Sony cassette recorder and a box of Maxell audio cassettes. 6 of them. On the first cassette, her father's sprawling handwriting, which she'd recognize anywhere. Refugee Camp, Sector Gamma, 98. Not an archive. Evidence. Claire pulled the laptop case from her bag. Empty. She transferred the recorder and cassettes into it, closed the metal box, called the clerk. When she left the bank, the sun was already low. Claire pressed the case to her chest, walking along the golden-lit sidewalk. And then she saw him. Julian Cross stood by a black sedan parked directly across from the entrance. Hands in the pockets of an impeccable gray coat. Silver hair catching the light. Pale blue eyes looking straight at her. Claire froze. He didn't move, didn't smile, just stood there, and his presence here, in this forgotten corner of the financial district, was absolutely impossible and absolutely deliberate. Claire. His voice was quiet, but she heard every word. I'd hoped your curiosity wouldn't take you this far. She didn't answer. Her fingers tightened on the case handle. Julian took a step forward, slow, measured. Marcus was a complicated man. Some of his methods, he paused, choosing words, are better left in the past. Give it to me, for his memory's sake. No, the word escaped before Claire could think it through. Firm, final. Something changed in Julian's face. The mask of courtesy cracked. He lunged. Long fingers clamped onto her wrist with unexpected, painful force. He jerked her toward him, second hand grabbing for the case. Foolish girl. The voice became hoarse, almost animal. You don't understand what you're trying to destroy. Claire felt fear. Real, physical, primal fear. The man she'd known her entire life, whom her father called friend, had become something dangerous. She twisted sharply, struck with the corner of the case against his shin. Julian exhaled through his teeth. The grip loosened for a fraction of a second. It was enough. Claire broke free, ran, dove into the stream of clerks and bankers hurrying home, heart pounding, breath ragged. She didn't look back, but felt his gaze on her spine, cold, analyzing, merciless. She ran to the subway, descended the stairs, jumped into the approaching train a second before the doors closed. Only when the train started moving did she allow herself to look back. The platform was empty. 20 minutes back to Greenwich Village felt like an eternity. Claire sat in the corner of the car, case on her lap. Her wrist throbbed with pain where Julian's fingers had dug into skin. She exited at her station, rose to the surface. Familiar streets greeted her with evening shadows. When she reached the studio, her hands shook so badly the key missed the keyhole twice. Finally, the door opened. Claire entered, locked both locks behind her, slid the chain, pressed her back against the door. The studio's silence enveloped her. But safety was gone. She retrieved the recorder, found the old cassette player she kept as a relic, connected studio headphones to it, inserted the first cassette. With bated breath, pressed play. Crackle of old tape. Hiss. Then a voice. Her father's voice. Young, confident, alive. July 23rd, 98. Refugee Camp, Sector Gamma. Temperature over 100. Water running out. People, too. Claire closed her eyes. For a moment, it seemed like a mistake, that the cassettes contained exactly what she expected, a humanist's diary, testimony to tragedy. The voice continued. Met a boy yesterday, Amir, 8 years old. Lost his family in an airstrike. His eyes. They're almost perfect. Almost. But there's no fire in them. Not that abyss needed for the cover. Claire froze. Breathing stopped. Need a face, Marcus Hayes continued. A face that tells the world everything without words. This boy could be it. But he needs the right motivation. A second voice interjected, hoarse, accented. I can arrange it for extra payment. How much? 5,000. Cash. Deal. Claire tore off the headphones. Her hands shook. The room spun. No. This couldn't be her father. Couldn't be. But the voice was his. Unmistakably his. She forced herself to put the headphones back on, continue listening. The recording dragged on. Marcus Hayes discussed details, how to create conditions, how to direct the child's emotions, how to capture the perfect moment of despair. Her father, her hero, the humanist whose work hung in museums, a monster. The recording neared its end. Claire heard Marcus say, "Think that's enough for today." Click. She was already reaching for the stop button. Emptied. Destroyed. But the recording continued. One more second. Extra. In the deafening silence came a quiet voice. Not Marcus's voice. Another. With a thick Middle Eastern accent. You got what you wanted, Marcus? Now pay. Claire froze. Someone else had been in that tent. A witness. An accomplice. The secret became deeper and more dangerous. Claire didn't turn on the lights. The studio sank into half-darkness, pierced only by green glints from the cassette player's indicators. These dim lights cast ghostly illumination on her face, making it look like a mask. She sat on the floor, back against the cold wall. The recorder lay beside her. The second cassette spun inside the player, hissing and crackling. Her father's voice filled the silence. This material could sell to the New York Times, Marcus Hayes was saying. But I need the right emotion. A story about refugees, but not pitiful. Heroic. With the right face. The second voice, the one with the accent. How much you pay for right face? Depends on the quality. Claire closed her eyes. 68 beats per minute. 69. Control slipping away. She fast-forwarded the cassette, inserted the third one. Marcus's voice again. Younger, more energetic. Woman with child. Excellent. But the child's too well-fed. Doesn't work for a starvation story. Laughter. Cynical. Dry. Find me another one. Thin, preferably with a recently deceased relative. Claire tore off the headphones, hurled them to the floor. The room spun. Walls closed in. She looked at the photographs displayed throughout the studio. Faces stared back at her. Hundreds of faces. Refugees, war victims, children with hollow eyes. Trophies. Claire rose, walked to the iconic photograph of Amir. The small boy stared into the camera, eyes bottomless, mouth half open in a silent scream. Her entire life she'd seen this image as testimony to compassion. Now, she saw the hunt. Dawn broke through the blinds when the phone vibrated on the table. Claire picked it up mechanically, not looking at the screen. An email. Sender. law@crossandpartners.com. She opened it. The text was brief. Legal. Impersonal. Dear Miss Hayes, due to reports of your emotionally unstable condition, and in order to protect the valuable cultural heritage entrusted to the Marcus Hayes Foundation, your authority as curator has been temporarily suspended. Mr. Julian Cross, in his capacity as executor, assumes full control of the archive pending resolution of the situation. Respectfully, Cross and Partners Law Firm. Claire read the words again and again. They didn't change meaning. Emotionally unstable condition. Suspended. Full control. He'd stripped her of weapons, taken her territory, transformed her from heir to threat. She dressed in dark pants, black sweater, grabbed her bag, went outside. Greenwich Village greeted her with morning silence. Cafes just opening. Coffee smell mixed with cold January air. Claire walked fast, purposefully. Familiar streets, her neighborhood, her world. When the studio appeared around the corner, she stopped. Two men stood by the massive doors. Suits fit perfectly, shoulders broad, faces impenetrable. They didn't look like museum guards, more like bodyguards. Claire approached closer. Her footsteps sounded too loud on the empty sidewalk. One of the guards turned to her, gaze cold, professional. "Good morning, Miss Hayes." She didn't answer. Her fingers gripped keys in her pocket. "I'm sorry, but we can't let you in." Voice polite, absolutely unyielding. "This is my studio." Claire heard her own voice, quiet and steady. "Mr. Cross asked us to convey that he'll contact you when he deems appropriate." The second guard shifted, blocking the door. Claire stood on the sidewalk. Before her, her own life, her work, locked by two nameless hired men. She turned, walked away without looking back. 62 beats per minute. Breathing steady. Steps measured. Panic would come later. Now, only cold, cutting rage. Claire turned into the alley behind the building. Dumpsters stood against a brick wall. Smell of rotting waste mixed with exhaust fumes. She remembered. Her father had told her about the old basement system. The building had once been a print shop, and workers used underground passages to deliver cargo. She found the manhole behind the dumpsters. Rusty, covered in a layer of grime. Claire removed her coat, set her bag on the asphalt, grabbed the cold metal handle, pulled. The manhole didn't budge. She changed angles, threw her full weight against it, arm muscles tensed, metal shrieked. The manhole gave with a deafening screech. A black maw gaped before her. Smell of mildew and dampness hit her face. Claire pulled out her phone, turned on the flashlight, descended the rusty ladder into darkness. The basement greeted her with cold and silence. Concrete floor covered with pools of standing water. Pipes stretched along the low ceiling, overgrown with cobwebs and filth. The phone's flashlight beam caught fragments of reality from the darkness. Forgotten crates, broken chair, piles of old newspapers turned to gray pulp. Claire moved slowly, carefully. Every sound made her freeze. Somewhere water dripped, monotonous, nerve-wracking sound. She navigated the labyrinth by memory and intuition. Her father had shown her the building plans years ago, she remembered. The service staircase was in the far corner, behind the old boiler. Claire found it. Narrow, steep. Steps creaked underfoot. She climbed slowly, listening. Above, a door. Locked from inside, but the lock was old, simple. Claire retrieved the metal ruler from her bag, the same one she used to measure negatives, slid it between door and jamb, found the latch, pressed. Click. The door opened. Claire found herself in the studio corridor. Familiar walls, familiar smell of paper and chemicals. But the silence was different. Not peaceful. Violated. She walked into the main archive hall, stopped. Everything looked in place. Almost. Claire approached her desk, looked at the stack of books. They'd been moved, an inch to the left. Her breathing quickened. She dropped to her knees, looked at the floor by the shelving unit. A paperclip. One small metal paperclip on an immaculately clean floor. She would never have left it there. Someone had searched the studio, methodically, carefully, but not perfectly. Claire stood. Her gaze swept the hall, stopping on every detail. Filing cabinet drawer open a millimeter. Chair by the light table turned at a different angle. Julian Cross hadn't just locked her out. He'd already been inside. Her heart pounded as Claire approached the darkroom. The door to the archive's most sacred place. It had always been open, now locked. Claire tried the handle. Wouldn't budge. She pulled out the ruler again, slid it between door and jamb. Old lock, same trick her father had taught her. The latch gave with a quiet click. The door opened. Claire entered the darkness, found the switch. Red light flooded the room, safe light for working with film. Smell of chemicals. Acetic acid. Fixer. She looked around. Work tables. Developing trays. Enlarger. Everything in place. Almost. Claire approached the large white tray. Usually held finished prints. Now, dark, wet mass. Ash. She pulled tweezers from her pocket, bent over the tray, carefully extracted the largest fragment. Heavy paper. Half burned. She could make out several words, typewritten. Annual payment. Consulting services. Samir Al-Jamil. A name. Claire froze. Samir Al-Jamil. The second voice from the tape. The fixer. These weren't one-time payments. Annual payment. Marcus Hayes had been paying this man for years, disguised as consulting. Systematic concealment. Multi-year. Calculated. Claire returned to the main hall, retrieved the recorder, sorted through cassettes, checking markings. Found the right date. Refugee Camp, Sector Gamma, July 24, 98. The day after that first recording, her hands shook as she inserted the cassette into the player. Put on headphones. Pressed play. Hiss. Crackle of old tape. Camp sounds. Distant voices. Child's cry. Generator hum. Marcus Hayes's voice, louder. Amir, come here, son. I need your help. Quiet footsteps. Child's. Uncertain. Why? The boy's voice was hoarse from tears. I want to take your photograph, so people will see, so they'll help other children like you. Don't want to. Amir. Marcus's voice became softer, gentler. I understand. But think about others. About those who lost families, like you. Don't you want to help them? Silence. Tell me again, what happened to your mother? No, Amir. I need you to help me. Help other people see your pain. Tell what happened. A sob. Planes. It was loud. Mama said, run. Look at me, son. Marcus's voice was calm, patient, predatory. Remember her face. Remember what it looked like the last time. A scream, child's, piercing, soul-rending. Click, click, click. 3 strikes of the Leica's shutter. Not art. Gunshots. Claire ripped off the headphones, threw them on the table. She vomited into the trash can. Bile burned her throat. She sat on the floor, head in hands, room spinning, breath catching on sobs. The studio's silence enveloped her. Ringing. Deafening. And in that silence, right behind her, came a click. Quiet. Digital. Unmistakably recognizable. The sound of a smartphone camera shutter. Claire froze. Blood turned to ice. Every muscle tensed. She didn't dare turn around, but already knew. She was no longer alone. Slowly, very slowly, Claire turned her head. Julian Cross stood in the office doorway, silver hair perfectly styled, gray suit without a single wrinkle, pale blue eyes looking at her with cold satisfaction. In his outstretched hand, her smartphone. "Excellent shot," he said, voice even, almost pleasant. "Let's call it daughter discovering truth." Claire didn't move. Julian took a step forward, slowly ran his thumb across the phone screen. "I'd hoped you'd stop, but you turned out too much like him. Stubborn, obsessed, unable to accept that some doors are better kept locked." "How did you get in?" He raised an eyebrow. "Claire, I'm the executor. I have keys to everything, including your apartment, where I collected this phone this morning while you were occupied." He waited for her to reach the end, the very essence, to take everything from her at once. Behind him, silent as shadows, 2 guards appeared. They positioned themselves on either side of the door, blocking the only exit. Claire rose to her feet, legs trembling, but she forced herself to stand straight. "You can't." "Can't?" Julian smirked, dry, without warmth. "Claire, I already am. You broke into the archive after your access was revoked. You're in an emotionally unstable condition. You represent a threat to priceless cultural heritage." He took another step. "These men will escort you to a safe place, where you can rest. Get help." "You want to lock me up?" "I want to protect you. From yourself." Claire looked at the guards. They didn't move. Awaited signal. She looked at the recorder lying on the table 2 meters from her. Julian followed her gaze, shook his head. "Let's be pragmatic about this. You have recordings that tarnish your father's memory, recordings that will destroy everything he built. Do you really want that?" "I want the truth." "Truth?" Julian's voice sharpened. "The truth is that Marcus Hayes saved thousands of lives with his photographs. He drew attention to forgotten conflicts, raised millions for humanitarian organizations. That's truth." He paused. "What you heard on those tapes, those are methods. Unpleasant, yes, but necessary to achieve a higher purpose. Great art requires sacrifices. Sacrifices of children. Sacrifices of comfortable illusions." Claire clenched her fists, nails dug into palms. "Give me the recorder, Claire. Voluntarily, and we'll forget this incident." She didn't answer. Julian sighed, nodded to the guards. They moved. Claire grabbed the recorder from the table, pressed it to her chest. "Don't make them use force," Julian said quietly. Guards approached, hands extended, faces impassive. Claire backed up. Her back hit the shelving unit. The trap snapped shut. Julian Cross took another step forward. His pale blue eyes didn't leave the recorder in Claire's hands. "Don't make this difficult, Claire." Voice quiet, polite, absolutely unyielding. Guards froze on either side of the door, awaited command. Claire looked at the recorder, at Julian, at the guards. Calculation took 3 seconds. She couldn't win by force, couldn't get through them. Only weapon. Chaos. Her shoulders dropped. She slowly nodded, raised her hands in the classic gesture of surrender. "Fine." The voice came out quiet, submissive, broken. Julian relaxed slightly. A faint smirk touched the corner of his mouth. "Reasonable decision?" He nodded to the guards. One of them stepped forward. Claire extended her hand with the recorder. The guard reached for it. In that moment, she lunged for the wall. Her hand found the red fire alarm lever. Claire yanked it down with force. A deafening wail tore through the studio's silence. Red strobes kicked in overhead, transforming familiar space into a pulsing nightmare. Julian stepped toward her, mouth opening, but his words drowned in the siren. The guards hesitated. 1 second. 2. That was enough. Claire bolted for the table, grabbed the recorder, spun toward the fire exit. "Stop her!" Julian's shout barely cut through the wail. She ran down the corridor. Dark. Narrow. Heart pounding in her ears, mixing with the siren's scream. Behind, heavy footsteps of guards. Claire burst into the service stairwell, descended to the basement. Her boots clanging on metal steps. Dampness. Darkness. The siren's wail reaching down, muffled from above. She dove into the labyrinth of pipes, knew every turn, every branch. The guards didn't. Claire emerged through the manhole into the alley. Cold January air struck her face. She ran, without looking back. 3 blocks to the subway, her lungs burned. Recorder pressed to her chest like a heart worn outside the body. Descended steps to the platform. Train arrived within a minute. Claire dove into the car a second before doors closed. Sat in the corner. Pressed recorder to chest. Breathing ragged. 68 beats per minute. 72. 80. Control returned slowly. She exited at Canal Street, rose to the surface. Found a noisy cafe packed with tourists and students. Sat in the far corner, back to the wall. Pulled out phone, dialed. 3 rings. "Claire?" David Chen's voice was young, eager. "I have everything," she spoke fast, quiet. "Recordings, transcripts, my father's voice confessing to manipulation." Pause on the other end. "Christ, you're sure?" "Absolutely. This story will destroy his legacy. Are you ready to print it?" "Claire, this is story of the year. The story. Editor gave the green light yesterday when you first called. When can we meet?" "Tomorrow, 3 p.m. I'll send the address." She hung up, leaned back in the chair, closed her eyes. First time in 3 days she allowed herself to exhale. She'd won. Morning began with notifications on the phone. Claire woke in a cheap Queens motel. Window faced a brick wall. Room smelled of cigarettes and bleach. She opened the browser. First article appeared in Page 6 tabloid. "Legend's daughter on the brink. Sources report concerning behavior from Claire Hayes," Claire read. Fingers gripped the phone tighter with each paragraph. Anonymous family friends expressed concern, talked about financial disputes, attempts to contest the will. Paranoid episodes after father's death. Second piece. Third. Fourth. Julian Cross worked faster than she'd thought. He wasn't trying to stop the truth. He was poisoning the well. By the time her article came out, the world would already doubt her motives. Claire hurled the phone onto the bed. Stood. Walked to the window. Pressed forehead against cold glass. The brick wall stared back. She returned to the laptop. Put on headphones. Inserted the first cassette. Work began. Hours passed. Claire typed. Marcus Hayes's voice filled her head. "This boy is almost perfect, but he needs the right motivation." Fingers flew across keyboard. Transcript, Cassette 2, July 23, 1998. Mythaper. "This boy is almost perfect, but he needs the right motivation." Sajay. "How much you pay?" Mythaper. 5,000. Cash. She listened, typed, listened again. Coffee cooled on the table. Light outside the window shifted from gray to yellow to orange to black. Every word was a blow. Every phrase destroyed another shard of the myth. Her father. Her hero. A monster. Claire finished the transcription at 3 a.m., saved the file to flash drive, copied to cloud. Lay on the bed, still dressed, closed her eyes. Sleep didn't come. The cafe in the East Village was small, dark, smelled of roasted coffee and cinnamon. Tables pressed close together. Music played loud enough to drown conversation. Claire sat by the window, pulled cap low over eyes. David Chen appeared at exactly 3. Young, 26, maybe 27. Asian, lean, hungry eyes. He sat across from her. Didn't order coffee. "Show me," he said. Claire pulled the flash drive from her pocket, placed it on the table between them. David looked at it, extended his hand. "This is a bomb, Claire. Story of the year." His fingers touched the drive. "Editor approved. We'll give you full protection, lawyers, security if needed." Claire nodded. "When does it run?" "Day after tomorrow, Sunday edition, full cover, 6 pages inside." He pocketed the drive, stood. "You're doing the right thing." Claire looked into his eyes. "I hope so." David left, dissolved into the sidewalk crowd. Claire remained seated, stared out the window, drank cold coffee. For the first time in days, she wasn't alone. She'd found an ally. Claire left the cafe 20 minutes later. Sidewalk crowded with people. Students, tourists, office workers rushing home. She headed for the subway, hands in pockets, cap pulled low. On the corner, her gaze caught a black sedan parked across the street. Tinted windows. The same one from the bank. Claire didn't stop. Didn't speed up. Turned the corner, walked steadily, 68 steps per minute. Entered a bookstore, walked straight through, exited through service entrance. Descended into subway. Boarded train to Brooklyn. Got off next station. Surfaced. Caught a bus. Rode 3 stops. Got off again. Cat and mouse game stretched an hour. When Claire finally reached the apartment David had rented for her, her legs trembled with exhaustion. She locked the door, slid the chain, pressed back against the door, broke away. The apartment was tiny, studio in Bushwick. Window looked onto fire escape, but she was safe. Claire dropped bag on floor. Retrieved recorder. Last check. Make sure she'd copied everything. She sorted through cassettes, checked markings. 6 of them, all numbered. Wait, a 7th, at the very bottom of the box. Marked, personal. Claire didn't remember this cassette. Inserted it in the player. Put on headphones. Pressed play. Hiss. Emptiness. She fast-forwarded. Hiss. Forward again. Empty. Disappointed, Claire yanked out the headphones. Too sharply. Recorder slipped from her hands, hit the floor with a dull thud. Something clicked inside. Claire picked it up. On the small, faded LCD screen glowed words she'd never seen. Play hidden message. Yes, no. Her heart stopped. Hands trembled as she pressed yes. A voice emerged from the speaker. Marcus Hayes's voice. But not that one. Not confident. Not strong. Quiet. Hoarse. Cracked. Voice of an old man recording his last thoughts in darkness. Claire. Her name. She froze. If you're listening to this, I'm dead. Or I couldn't fix it myself. Pause. Heavy breathing. Cough. That photograph. A mirror. It gave me everything. The Pulitzer, fame, money, recognition. Longer pause. And it took everything from me. My soul. Peace. The ability to look in a mirror. Claire pressed headphones to her ears. Tears burned her eyes. I looked into that boy's eyes, and I stole from him, not just grief, his future, his right to his own story. The voice trembled. I turned him into an icon, a symbol, a commodity. I stole his childhood and sold it to the world. Silence. Tape hiss. I tried to forget. Couldn't. I paid Samir for years, thought money would buy forgiveness. Bought only silence. Cough. Heavy. Wet. Claire, sweetheart. Voice softened. Don't defend me. My name is already Ash. I earned that. Pause. Protect him. Protect the boy. Claire stopped breathing. Tell the truth, but in a way that frees him, not destroys him. Recording cut off. Claire ripped off headphones, hurled recorder to the floor, stood, grabbed phone, dialed David's number. 1 ring. 2. 3. Claire? Voice sleepy. It's 11:30 at night. Stop the publication. What? David, do you hear me? The article can't run. Stop it. Now. Heavy pause. Claire, I can't. You have to. It's a mistake. Listen. David's voice hardened. The editor signed off 3 hours ago. It's already at the printer. In a few hours, first copies hit the stands. No. Can't stop it now. Train's left the station. His voice mixed pity and excitement. He didn't want to stop. This was his story. His breakthrough. David. Sorry, Claire. This is a story the world needs to hear. You said so yourself. Dial tone. Claire sank to the floor. Phone slipped from fingers. Room spun. She was defending her father, destroying his legacy, avenging him, fulfilling his last wish. But she wasn't protecting Amir. Her article would transform him from killer to victim, but leave him in the same cage, the same frame. New icon, new symbol, new commodity. Amir the Avenger instead of Amir the victim. Same trap, new packaging. Claire clutched her head. Her victory was defeat. She'd betrayed her father's last wish and done to Amir exactly what Marcus Hayes had done his entire life. Stolen his story, turned it into commodity, sold it to the world. The clock on the wall ticked, second by second. The printer worked. Machines printing. Words becoming ink. Ink becoming truth. Truth that would free no one. Claire sat on the floor, back against wall, knees drawn to chest. The recorder lay beside her. Silent. Accusing. Her father's voice echoed in her head. Protect him. Protect the boy. She'd failed the only thing that mattered. The article went live online at midnight. Claire wasn't sleeping. Sat by the window of the tiny Bushwick apartment, stared at the fire escape, at the brick wall across. Refreshed the page. Empire of Lies, how photojournalism icon Marcus Hayes manipulated child grief for fame. Her name stood beside David Chen's. Co-authors. Claire closed the laptop. By morning, the phone exploded with notifications. She silenced it, watched the numbers grow. Shares, comments, quotes. By noon, Marcus Hayes' name appeared on every news channel. Not as genius, as monster. Museums issued press releases. Reevaluating Marcus Hayes' exhibition in light of new revelations. Universities canceled lectures. Publishers suspended album sales. Claire stood by the window, watched the destruction. This should have been triumph. Felt like execution. Julian Cross's press conference began at 2 p.m. Claire turned on the live stream on her laptop. He stood behind a podium in the Plaza Hotel conference room, suit impeccable, face serious, mournful. This morning the world learned a painful truth about a man many, including myself, considered a hero. Voice measured, calm. Marcus Hayes was a genius. But geniuses are human, and humans make mistakes. He paused, swept his gaze across journalists. The Marcus Hayes Legacy Foundation acknowledges the facts presented in the article. We will not defend the indefensible. We will learn from mistakes. Claire leaned closer to the screen. Today, I announce the creation of the Amir Hassan Grant, $1 million annually to support ethical journalism and protect subject rights. Camera flashes, barrage of questions. Julian smiled. Sadly, nobly. We cannot change the past, but we can build a better future. Claire slammed the laptop shut. He wasn't defending Marcus. He was burying him. And using the corpse as foundation for a new empire. By evening, Amir was everywhere, not the child's face from the iconic photograph. Adult, lean, dark eyes staring from screens, covers, social media posts. Hashtag justice for Amir. Hashtag truth matters. Hashtag never again. Graffiti appeared on walls across the city. His face, his name. Journalists interviewed activists. This symbolizes how Western media exploits developing world suffering. Amir's lawyers called their own press conference. Our client is not a criminal. He's a victim of a system that stole his childhood and sold his pain. Claire read headlines, one after another. Complex story became simple narrative. Victim versus system. Good versus evil. Icon replaced icon. Same frame. New face. Phone rang. David Chen. Claire answered. Claire, congratulations. Editor said it's the best piece of the year. Awards almost guaranteed. Great. Listen, I'm thinking about a follow-up. Series on systemic problems in photojournalism. You in? Claire looked at the wall. Empty. Gray. No. What? Claire, this is your chance. Topic's exhausted, David. That's what editorial thinks, right? Pause. Well, they said we need to move on, but... Thanks for calling. She hung up, turned off the phone, set it on the table. Claire Hayes no longer existed for this story. She was a tool. Used. Set aside. Trial scheduled for end of week. Expedited process. Public pressure. Claire didn't go to the courtroom. Watched the live stream on laptop. Amir's lawyer addressed the jury. My client was defending himself. Not from physical threat, from existential one. Marcus Hayes stole his identity, turned him into a commodity. Amir Hassan reclaimed his right to his own story, the only way he saw possible. Jurors listened, nodded. Verdict announced after 3 hours. Not guilty. Courtroom erupted in applause. Amir stood, motionless, face calm, impenetrable. Cameras caught every millimeter of his expression. Claire closed the laptop. In that moment, someone knocked on the door. She approached, looked through peephole. Courier. Opened door, took cardboard folder, signed. Courier left. Claire returned to the room, set folder on table, No return address. No marking. She sat, opened the folder. Inside, bank document printouts. Claire flipped through them, eyes scanning lines. Offshore accounts. Company registered in Cayman Islands. Manager, Julian Cross. Owner, Marcus Hayes. Annual transfers, starting 1998, ending 2025. Recipient, Samir Al-Jamil. Amounts varied, $50,000 to $150,000 annually, not one-time payments. System, lifelong support of a ghost. Claire turned the last page. Beneath statements lay one sheet. Copy of the burned document. The same one she'd found in the darkroom. Annual payment. Consulting services. Samir Al-Jamil. And below, an addition. Small, neat handwriting. Every tool has its purpose. Yours is complete. Thank you. Claire recognized the handwriting, had seen it on court documents. Amir. Understanding came slowly, like cold water filling lungs. First envelope with key. Anonymous. Sent at perfect moment. This folder, delivered on verdict day. He knew about Samir. From the beginning, he'd found him. Studied him. Used him as key to exposure, and used her as scalpel. She wasn't detective, not avenger. Tool in someone else's game. Claire sat in silence, held proof in her hands. She could publish this, expose Amir, show the world his calculation, destroy the new icon. But for what? Create the next myth? Next cycle? Claire placed documents on table, stood, walked to window. City beyond glass lived its life, indifferent, eternal. She was tired of narrative games, refused to be a tool. At night, Claire returned to the studio. Last time. She used the old key, the one Julian hadn't managed to take. Door opened silently. Studio greeted her with darkness, smell of dust and old paper. Claire turned on the light. Walls were bare, photographs removed, archive sealed. She walked to shelves in far corner, found box marked Gamma 98. Opened it. Inside, contact sheets, hundreds of frames. Rejected. Forgotten. Claire flipped through them. Searching. Found it. Several frames early in the series, before meeting Marcus. Small boy kicking dusty soccer ball. Laughing. Carefree. A child. Not victim. Not symbol. Just a boy. Claire photographed contact sheets on her phone. Carefully. Every frame. Put box back. Turned off light. Closed studio door behind her. Forever. Home. Claire opened laptop. Found small non-profit photojournalism archive site. Professional. No ads. No sensationalism. Registered under anonymous name. Uploaded scanned frames. Added information. Amir Hassan, refugee camp, Sector Gamma, July 23, 1998. Minutes before his story was told. No accusations. No interpretations. Facts. Clicked Publish. This wouldn't change headlines, wouldn't stop the machine, but would add correction to archive. For those who knew how to look, quiet victory. Personal, not over people, over lies. Amir's press conference aired live. Claire turned it on her laptop. He stood before dozens of cameras. Suit fit perfectly. Face calm. Today I announce a memoir book deal, he said in quiet, even voice. A story of survival, of seeking justice, of reclaiming control over one's own life. Camera flashes. Applause. Claire watched his face, searched for something human, saw only mask. Phone vibrated on table. Message from Julian Cross. He became more valuable than your father. You lost. Claire looked at apartment's bare walls, at empty table, at window beyond which city lived its life. She didn't feel like she'd lost. She'd lost a game she no longer wanted to play. And in that was freedom. Claire picked up phone, slowly typed response. Price tags offer things in frames. I took mine down. Pressed send. Turned off phone. Set it on table. Stood, walked to window, opened it wide. Cold January air rushed into the room. Claire inhaled, deeply. For the first time in months, didn't know what she'd do tomorrow. Didn't know who she'd become without archive, without legacy, without myth. This should have frightened her. Instead of fear, lightness. The frames that had held her entire life no longer existed. She was free. Claire closed laptop, turned off light, lay on bed, closed eyes. Outside city hummed. Cars, voices, life. Tomorrow she'd wake up and start building herself anew, without lies, without myths, without frames.